What does your wedding stationery really communicate? It's a lot more than just save the date. Stay tuned.
Welcome to Weddings with Zita. Here's your host and producer, Zita Christian.
Hi everyone, welcome to the show. From the time that I was a little kid and got my first allowance, I have been a fan of paper and love stationery stores. So I am delighted to have my guest with us tonight, Ashleigh Pritchard. She is a wedding stationer. Ashleigh, thanks for being on the show tonight.
You're welcome. It's a pleasure.
I love seeing all the things that you brought in, and of course my fondness for paper is on high gear right now. So I want to talk about everything that you brought and more.
Absolutely.
I know that as in your work designing wedding stationery, and from my perspective as a wedding officiant, and sometimes I get an invitation and see the program, so I see so many different styles that ordinarily I don't think I might not see in my everyday in my everyday life. So I'm getting a perspective of enormous variety today that certainly wasn't the case years and years ago when I got married. So I want to talk about the idea about impressions do count. They certainly do say a lot. They speak a lot about the couple, and there's so many aspects to it. So when I looked at your website, I saw something called a stationery suite. Talk to us about what a stationery suite is and what are the things that are included in it. Because when I was young, it was the wedding invitation and maybe a little card an RSVP card, and that was it.
Things have definitely exploded as far as options for what you can include in your suite. So the basic stationery suite started out as an invitation and an RSVP card, but now you can expand your suite to include all the paper that is involved in your wedding, starting with your save the date cards, and then with your invitation now you can include different kinds of RSVPs and enclosure cards such as a directions card, a registry card, an accommodations card, any information that you think is going to be helpful to your prospective guests. You can also include special embellishments like a belly band, which holds all the pieces together inside the envelope, or even with the inner and outer envelopes, there's a lot more variety involved in them now.
There's and I have to ask too, that pretty piece of the almost clear looking paper, like a vellum.
The vellum.
What is the purpose of that?
Well, originally, when invitations were printed using an older method called engraving, the ink would stick to the inside of the envelope during transit, through the heat and the humidity. So a piece of vellum was included on top of the invitation because it would prevent it from sticking.
Oh, how smart.
Yes.
So it's an echo to a time long, a vintage idea.
It's the same with the inner and outer envelope. The outer envelope was meant to protect the inner envelope during transit so that when the envelope reached its recipient, they could hold a clean envelope. These days it's debatable whether or not that's still necessary, but it's become more of an aesthetic decision whether or not to include the vellum or to include the double envelopes. People who do are usually going for a more traditional, formal, grander style, and that old style of invitation helps communicate that.
Yeah, I think the style, the color, the shape, the font, everything communicates something. I am fascinated by the variety and you brought a lot of great things here to show us. In fact, I want to look at one of them right now. We have one that has some lilacs on it. So yeah, here we're looking at pieces from a stationery suite, right?
Yes.
So what do we see here?
So this is a more inclusive suite. The invitation is wrapped with a belly band. And then the other pieces, you can see there's an RSVP card and an envelope. And then there's two what are called enclosure cards. One of them is a directions card, which includes a custom map. And the other one is a wedding website card, which is a more modern version of the registry card. A lot of couples create websites using
Yes.
services that include not only their registry information, but hotel information, if they're having a brunch the day after or a reception dinner the night before, they'll include all that information. Some couples also include their story for people who might not see every day, distant family members who are coming who maybe even haven't met one of the spouses to be yet. So the website card is a way to convey all that information with just a little bit of printed detail.
I love how the lilacs are echoed through all of the pieces in slightly different ways. So it pulls the whole thing together. You see the unity in it. That's gorgeous. Now I noticed one of the pieces that was right underneath, and we're going to look at that one in just a minute. That was had a little bit of a map on it. Yes. Showing directions.
Yes.
That wasn't something years ago you wouldn't even think to
No.
need something like that, or you would pull out your regular old folding map and find where you were going. But let's take a look at that lovely piece that was showing the directions. Is that a fairly common thing nowadays? I mean, with GPS and everything, do people use this in their wedding suite?
You would think with GPS being so popular that a map would seem obsolete, but there's actually a couple of different reasons for including a map. One is, especially if you know that your location maybe doesn't show up on Google Maps, or if there's a tricky turn that a lot of people get wrong, that would be a good reason to include a map.
Yeah, you don't want to lose your guests.
Yeah, exactly. So some people use it to show the route to get, from maybe the airport to their wedding location. People who are having their ceremony and reception in different locations have maps showing the quickest route from one to the other.
So when somebody's doing a map, like those directions like that, do they say to you, I want a map to this place and I want a map to this place, and you find it, or do they draw something for you?
What I usually do, some people, they'll send me a map that was provided by the venue that they want to dress up. But for most people, what I'll do is I'll actually have them start in Google, use something called the Maps engine in Google, which is where you can drop your own little pins exactly where you want them to be and label them and draw a box around where you want the map to show.
Oh, okay.
And that way, I have a visual representation of where I need to get started. And I actually started doing that after I had trouble a couple of times drawing the wrong map because Google had it wrong, which is why you need a map sometimes.
Yes, I understand that well. So of all of these various pieces, I mean, there's a lot of options, but are there maybe two or three that are the standard ones, the ones that the couple is always going to order?
Yes, the invitation is always going to be there. Some couples are opting to not include an RSVP. If they're doing a smaller wedding or a wedding with mostly young people, some couples use an RSVP service online where they they put a website on the bottom of the invitation and you RSVP there. But most couples are still including a paper RSVP. And then the next biggest one is a wedding website card, because you can include all the extra information on the website and then just have that one card. Instead of having 4 or 5 different pieces in the suite, they'll opt to keep it to those 3.
I would imagine too, as all those pieces add up, the postage adds up too.
Yes.
So, and that's going to be a cost factor. We'll
Yes.
talk more about other cost factors later, but that's one of the things that immediately occurs to me. Some of the different elements that people choose from, whether they're doing 2 or 3 pieces in the suite or 5, 6, 7, 8, 10 pieces. I know that there are different kinds of paper for one thing, and and so many different colors and everything. You sent me a beautiful photo that was, we're calling it plumbago here so we can identify it. Let's pull that one up. This, yeah, tell me about this. What are some of the choices in here that a couple would have made to create that?
This was inspired by a custom request by a client. The design is based on my plumbago suite, but they wanted to create a thank you card using a modern style of typography, which is interchanging different sizes and colors and fonts to put emphasis on different words and create real character while you're reading it. So you almost feel like you hear the change in the voice as you're reading along.
Yes.
And so you create this blend on paper that evokes an emotion while you're reading it.
And then you've got the beautiful soft pastel in the background that's echoed in some of the ink and the florals. That is just gorgeous.
Thank you.
That's just beautiful. There's another one I wanted to take a look at because you were kind enough to bring one of the original pieces that inspired this, and this is this menu. Ashleigh, this is just beautiful.
Thank you.
So talk to me about this.
So this is part of a different kind of stationery that's called Day of Stationery, where you have your menu or a table number card or your escort cards. And this piece, this is the menu from a new suite of mine. And the design, actually, like many of mine, uses an original painting that I did on paper with paint brushes, which is then digitized using a high-resolution photography and put into the computer so that I can manipulate it. I could do a different color rose on it, or adjust the size of the rose or the angle of the rose to create something that is half of a pre-done design and half of a customized design.
That is just beautiful. Now I'm going to see if we can get a camera over here to that beautiful painting that is sitting next to you.
Yes.
And that is the rose that you painted that
Yes.
yourself.
Yeah.
And that's what you're talking about, digitizing so that you could later change the color. And
Yes, so this
that is gorgeous.
it's a piece of aquarelle watercolor paper. The paint is acrylic paint. And I play with it. I actually, I'll do a lot of different playing around with it. I'll restart the painting. I also, I try to paint the elements separately. If you remember, the menu also had leaves
Yes.
from the roses. Those are painted separately so that if I want to play around with how the leaves interact with the rose, then I can do that on the computer. And I very much enjoy painting, and it's what inspired me to get started doing this kind of stationery.
When you were a kid, did you get coloring books all the time for gifts?
yes.
Did you? I did too. Yeah,
I was
can't
that
do
kid
but
who
yeah,
I
me
signed up
too.
for art every year. My bachelor's degree is in fine arts.
Oh, okay.
I did my senior thesis in painting. So I've been doing art my whole life. I've always had a love of it. And I've always kind of had this battle between physical art and digital art, and this lets me use both.
You can use both.
Yeah.
That reminds me of something I wanted to ask you about because of your formal background, your formal education in art, and how you have taken that knowledge and created, this beautiful service that you can provide to couples. I would think that there would be a real advantage for a couple to deal with a professional designer as opposed to trying to do some of this work on the do-it-yourself side of things and use the pre-printed stationery that you just run through a copier and add your own information to it.
Yes.
I understand the need for budget. I really do, but there is a huge difference, isn't there, with what a couple can do on their own versus working with a professional?
Absolutely. There is, especially if you aren't very familiar with working on the computer or you don't have a little bit of design education on your own. It can be not only a challenge to get what you want, but also to know the techniques to have things look the way that you want them to.
Yeah.
There's a lot of little things that you learn in art school and design school that are subconscious, that you could look at two different things and say which one is better, but you might not be able to express why. But someone like me who has an education, I can look at something and say, oh, if you make this slight adjustment or make the color a little bit more blue, then it changes the whole feel. And that's something that I can bring to the table to help couples who really value having more control over the aesthetic feel of their invitations.
I think too, based on what you just said, there's got to be a lot that you bring to the conversation that helps the couple know, here's the implication down the road of the decision you make right now.
Yes.
And if the couple is doing it on their own, they're not necessarily going to discover that implication until, I won't say it's too late, but it's certainly going to be very costly to have to redo.
There are some decisions that if you don't know exactly what you're doing, you could end up maybe having to get your invitations all reprinted, and that would cost a lot of money. Or if you aren't paying attention maybe to the size or shape of your invitations, a lot of people don't know that square invitations, which are becoming very popular, cost more money to mail because of the machinery has trouble with the square size of the envelope.
Yeah.
So it's good to know going in that if you choose to do a square invitation, that your postage budget is going to be much higher than you would expect.
Yeah, just because of the shape.
Yes.
Fascinating stuff. Let's talk about the sample that you provide to couples, because I know, based on just conversations we've had, when a couple works with you and you're talking about, well, in fact, you tell me, what are the kind of questions that you're going to ask them? Let's say I'm sitting down with you, and Dick and I are getting married, and we want you to do our invitations. What are the things that you would ask?
Well, I would ask, about the ceremony. What venue are you using? Do you have a theme? Colors that you want to incorporate? Sort of what emotion do you want to evoke with your stationery? There's a lot of different ranges. You can go something very traditional where it's just like a very beautiful script font on a fine paper, or you could do something that's more modern. A lot of people are doing eco-friendly, where it's like on recycled brown paper. Some people choose to go with very vibrant inks because they want to have a very high emotional, fun, vibrant feel to their their event.
What you're just saying confirms what I've always known, is that your choice of paper, the ink, the fonts, the color, the shapes, the rounded or square edges or deckled or whatever, it says so much about a personality.
It does.
It's much, much more than just a piece of paper. So you have you brought a sample here, I know, a kit with us. Show us a little bit about what's in that kit.
So when customers can order these from me, or they would see it in person, it's a basic kit. They can order it with or without a sample of an invitation. The kit shows a whole bunch of fonts that they can choose from. That shows a whole bunch of color ideas, and of course these can always be customized. People can request a certain font or a certain color if they want to. And then the big thing, the paper.
Yes.
I have a swatch book, so customers, they can feel the paper, see how it catches the light. Some papers have different textures, metallic papers.
Oh, this is amazing.
Yes, it creates a whole different feel,
and
depending on the paper. Because
I also love to read, and I've got stacks of books everywhere, I see things like this and I'm immediately looking at, bookmarks, and this, Ashleigh, this is great. This stuff is beautiful. We may get back to that in here in a minute, but I just noticed too the folder. So just the way things are packaged, everything about it, very classy.
Thank you.
Very, very classy. in terms of different design elements, I know that you can also do double-sided pieces, right? So somebody could have one piece, and so I'm thinking about the cost of postage, but you really could print on both sides and get double benefit.
Absolutely, that's something that we do. That is a way of sort of dressing up your invitation without adding to the postage and without really increasing the cost, because you don't need any extra paper, which is the biggest cost in the invitations. Per invitation is the cost of paper. So I brought an example of printing on the back down here at the front.
We can't get over there to see that, but I can assure you that the piece that is right below me, I can see the back here, and it's got the beautiful printing on the back as well.
Yeah, so this piece, this is the lilac invitation that we saw earlier.
Yes.
So it has the invitation information on the front, and then if you turn to the back, it has a detail of the watercolor painting. So it adds just a little extra color, a little extra pizzazz without really adding much cost. And that's something that I love to help couples with, especially if they're on a budget, ways that they can add some personalization that don't really run up their costs.
That's an excellent idea. So I have another photo I want to show here, and this one, what we're looking at here are envelopes. So let's take a look at that one.
Yes.
Okay, so talk to us about this.
So the most traditional way of addressing envelopes is hand calligraphy. But with printing and printing on envelopes becoming more and more accessible and cheaper, there's a new addressing style that I call digital addressing. Some places call it recipient addressing. And this is creating an address style on the computer and then importing all of your guests' addresses through it and printing it on the envelope. So you get this fancy envelope that starts to bring the emotions out before they even open the envelope.
It's like branding. It's like corporate branding, only you're branding the wedding.
Exactly.
I want to go to another one here because I want to be sure I get this last photo in too. And this one is, oh, look at this script. This is gorgeous. What are we seeing here?
This is what I call the scripted suite. This is a fairly standard invitation showing with it, instead of the standard RSVP, instead of having an RSVP card with an envelope that you have to mail.
Well, this is. I see
a-
exactly what you're talking about here, and you've got the postcard so that you can almost it's an economical way to get the information out, and I can see the value in doing something like that.
It is. It's one way to bring down your cost. It's considered polite to pre-stamp the envelopes for your guests.
Yeah.
But if you do a postcard like this, the postage is actually cheaper.
A lot.
There's a postcard rate that's about 10 cents cheaper than the envelope rate.
Which you don't think is much unless you're sending out 150 or 200 invitations.
Exactly. So anywhere you can cut off a little bit, that it can be beneficial, and you can use that someplace else.
You know what occurs to me? We only have a few minutes left. One of the big things has got to be the time. How much time do you suggest to the couple? Keep in mind, when they start out, they don't know the answers to all those questions that you ask because they haven't looked at all those fonts, they haven't looked at all that paper. So from the moment they come in for that first conversation to the point where they actually need the invitations printed to mail them out, what kind of time frame are we looking?
I suggest that couples start looking between 4 to 6 months out from their wedding date. So if you kind of work your way backwards, you want to have your invitations in the mail 6 to 8 weeks before the event, so that they have enough time to get there. In case they get lost in the mail or something, you can keep an eye on that, and then your guests have enough time to check their schedules, maybe make a hotel reservation before they have to RSVP.
Good idea.
And you want to give yourself between 2 to 4 months, depending on the type of invitation that you want. You want to start looking at what styles you want. Maybe use Pinterest to collect things you like.
Good idea.
Magazine clippings to narrow down what kind of style you want before you start looking at specific invitations that you want to order.
That brings me to a question that I was fascinated by when I looked at some of your reviews. You have beautiful reviews, very complimentary reviews. I can tell, obviously, your clientele really appreciates what you do. One of the things that several people commented on was the fact that you give honest advice. So give me an example of a situation that might require such advice.
Well, a couple of the things that I'll give advice on are if a couple recommends, oh, I think I want to put this on the invitation, like, I want to put a graphic here, or, I want to include this language on the invitation, I'll let them know, well, we can do that, but etiquette says you shouldn't, or etiquette says you should phrase it this way. And, I do let them make their own decisions, but I want to make sure they have all the information. In the end, it's, I tell all of my clients, in the end, it's your invitation, but it's also my job to make sure that it's the best it can be.
Absolutely, because it's your reputation as well. Unfortunately, we don't have enough time to get into some of the other things I have here, and I had a lot of questions to ask you. So let me just say that my guest is Ashleigh Pritchard, and your company, CharmCat, CharmCat.net. And I want to mention that if you go to Ashleigh's website, you will see a whole lot of information about how to budget for your stationery, lots of ideas, lots of samples, lots of great reviews, lots of really good information. And there's also some really helpful information for the do-it-yourself couple who is looking to economize and still can get something beautiful and embellish something simple that if they start out with something simple, they can create it and on their own. So I think, unfortunately, Ashleigh, I've got the signal that we are out of time, and I have about 30 seconds. What changes do you anticipate in this whole world of stationery here in the next year or so?
I think the biggest change is going to be couples saying that they don't care about some of the past etiquette, that they, some of the more modern things. I think the email RSVP is going to become much bigger. Even maybe some couples send out email invitations, all completely paperless, to be eco-friendly or just to keep their costs down. And I think that you're going to start seeing a lot more variety and a lot more couples bucking tradition.
I understand. Thank you for that good information. And it's time, unfortunately, to say goodbye. So, Ashleigh, thank you very much for being here. CharmCat, gorgeous, great website, lots of information. I want to thank you and the viewing audience for watching as well, and thank you to my crew. And I love to close for this show thinking about that whole idea of love. They say love makes the world go round. So go out there and start spinning. Join us again next time. Bye-bye.
Are you planning a wedding or renewing your vows? Let today's leading wedding vendors inspire and guide you. To learn about upcoming guests and join the discussion, like us on Facebook, Zita TV. Weddings with Zita is a program of Moon River Rituals. For more information, visit zitatv.com.